Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. We're doing something a little bit different. I've always wanted to do, tier lists like this. They look like a lot of fun. So I thought we would just run through this really quickly. You can see here that I have S tier, A tier, B, C, D, F, and then haven't seen, because there are still some on here that I obviously have not seen. We're not going to go in order here. Obviously, you can see all the, options here are in a random order. So I'm just going to go left to right all the way down. So first up, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. So right off the bat, that's going into haven't seen, and I do not plan to. The reputation of those movies are not good. You should never let that dictate, whether or not you see a movie, whether or not you watch it. And I don't, but I just have no desire to it's just not. I love Ant-Man in the comics, but I love Hank Pym Ant-Man. The moment they decided to do Scott Lang instead of Hank Pym, they just ruined it. I don't know why they went in this direction. Same goes for Ant-Man. I tried to watch it one time, but it's just not. Something about it did not click with me, and I'm just not a fan of it. I like Ant-Man in the Avengers movies, but I'm not interested in watching a whole 2 movies about it. Maybe if it was Hank Pym. So moving on, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. So immediately that one is going C tier. I feel like this is a nice average baseline movie, so it's literally just perfect for the C tier. This movie, I'm sure a lot of people think it deserves to be here, but I think this movie gets a bad rap. I definitely think that it deserves a lot of the criticism that it has received. I think there are so many arguments against this movie that make perfect sense, because it does have issues, and for a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, it's not enjoyable. And there are a lot of weird creative decisions, a lot of weird, why the fuck did they do that? There's a lot of that throughout this movie, and I understand why people don't like it, but I think it's pretty good. I think there's more good in this movie than there is bad. Next up, we got Avengers Infinity War, and automatically that is going straight up to S tier. I really don't think that I need to explain that one. Next up, we have Captain Marvel. That is immediately going into haven't seen, and I never will. I have not heard really a single good thing about this movie. Other solo movies, at least, Homecoming, that at least gets people talk about the movie. Doctor Strange, there's oh my god, there's so much to like about this movie, even when it has issues with the pacing and stuff like that. I've heard people defending this movie, saying it's good, saying it's okay, but I've never heard someone willingly talk about this movie in a positive way. I think it's because the trailers did a good job of showing what the movie was like at its core, which was fucking boring. I like Carol Danvers. Her time in the comics as Miss Marvel, one of my favorite character arcs in general. In the MCU, however, it just looks like Brie Larson does not know how to smile. Next up, we have Winter Soldier. Immediately S tier. It's probably my favorite MCU movie, and it doesn't even do anything that crazy. It's not even amazing in the way that Infinity War or No Way Home are. It's just such a solid, straightforward story, and I love it so much. There's so much to like about this movie. I could ramble on about it forever, and I just S tier. That's all I can say. Now we have the first Captain America, and that's going to A tier. A lot of people, I feel would put this in S tier. A lot of people have it on the same level as Winter Soldier, but I'm not as much of a fan of it as most people are. The way people rave about this movie, it's because it's really good and it's done really well, even just as a period piece. And I think the idea of, the movie ending with him in the present day, that's a really cool idea. And just throughout, the movie was a really interesting story. With a character like Captain America, it definitely could have been a lot more boring, but they did a really good job with it. So it's really impressive, but I'm just not super crazy about it. I'm crazy about movies that I can watch over and over and over again, and this is not a movie that I want to rewatch. The first time that I watched it all the way through, I was like, wow, that was actually a lot better than I was expecting, but I'm not looking to go back through that story again. Next up, we have Civil War, and that one is probably going A tier as well. Still to this day, I love the story of Civil War so much. It's amazing how they managed to make it so much better than the comics, because people often make fun of this movie for the fact that it's not as bombastic, not as crazy as the Civil War comic. It doesn't have as many heroes to get involved, so it lacks the war part. It doesn't pack a punch the same way. But in terms of story, the comic, if you don't know, if you have not tried to read that, it's an incoherent mess, and it's just not as good as it absolutely should have been, which is really disappointing. And there's so many plot holes and there's so many like weird creative decisions. In this movie, it's fairly straightforward. It's just like a lot of character threads coming together. It kind of feels like the story changes because of like there are multiple different conflicts fueling the Civil War, but you know, I think that works in the movie's favor. The only reason it's not in S tier is because I feel like there are multiple things holding it back from being that good. Next up, we got Doctor Strange. That's gonna be our first B tier. This is one of those movies where I can just rewatch over and over and over again. I feel like the premise is strong, the visuals are strong, a lot of it still holds up to this day. The story's still pretty good, but there are a lot of aspects of the story that just aren't as exciting, as well done as it could have been. One common criticism of this movie that's used a lot is the issue of the pacing, and I absolutely agree with that. You know, this movie does have a pacing problem a little bit that makes the movie feel really weird, how he just kind of jumps from amateur to, oh, he's Doctor Strange now. And I feel like that really holds the movie back a lot. But on top of that, there are just elements of this movie, I can't even put it into words. On top of the fact that the pacing is weird, there are just certain elements to the movie, like the side characters, the villain, there are like a lot of elements there that were definitely okay, could have been a lot better. Next up, we have Endgame. This is a big one. Just kidding. I think I'm gonna go A tier. You know, this movie is still enjoyable. I still rewatch this movie. Sometimes I stop halfway through and then like 2 hours later come back and watch the second half of the movie, but it still has that rewatch value. This movie I feel like got hit so hard with that, you know, fan reaction of comes out and it's like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever. And then like once the hype dies down, people start hating on it like crazy. I feel like it got hit with that like a lot more than it actually deserved. There were definitely character choices in this movie that were questionable, without a doubt. You know, Thor and Hulk, that pissed me off just as much as anybody. But I feel like those things don't hold back the movie from being fantastic. It still was like an amazing story. It was still like, you know, really pushing what we were used to just in movies in general and Marvel, and, you know, really shaking up the formula a bit. And it was really nice to see this movie. Rewatching it now compared to when it came out, it's definitely not as exciting, you know, for obvious reasons, but I still think through and through they did an amazing job on this story. The fact that they went through like 500 drafts of this movie, I feel like the final draft that they came up with was not bad. Definitely could have been so much worse. This movie could have easily been disappointing. I consider myself lucky that I can see this movie and still be like, well, at least the only disappointing aspects were like Thor and Hulk. Next up, we have Guardians of the Galaxy. This one's an interesting one. I think we are going to go A tier. This one is still fantastic. People commonly reference this movie as like Marvel can make a movie about anything, and rightfully so. This movie is amazing, and I don't think anybody really expected it to be, and I don't think anyone expected it in general. You know, this is such a surprise of a movie. Like even today, I'd be surprised. Like it's just weird to me that this movie came before like some of the other ones. You know, this movie came out before Scarlet Witch or Vision were introduced. Like to me, that's just bizarre. It's weird that they decided to introduce this movie this early, but you know, it worked out in the long run, and you know, the plan that they had for them, clearly it worked out and it made sense. And this movie was just a perfect start to who these characters are, and just the story was really enjoyable at the same time. This is another one of those movies where it's like they could have easily fumbled it and they didn't at all. Oh god, now Guardians 2. So I think this one's going C tier. This is a debate that I see all the time. A lot of people consider Guardians 2 to be better than the first one. A lot of people consider Guardians 1 to be better than 2. I personally agree with the latter. I really just do not like this one. I would rank it lower if I could, but I feel like that would just be overly disrespectful because the movie is I'm sorry if you can hear the engines outside. You know, the movie is still well made. It's not trash, it's not a garbage movie, but it's definitely not on the same level as the first Guardians. It's not as enjoyable. It feels like in a lot of ways they just rehashed the same stories. This movie just feels redundant. I feel like there's so much more they could have done with the sequel. The whole story with Peter and his dad, you know, it was good, but it also felt pretty underwhelming, and it, you know, just overall the fucking story, I don't know. I see this movie and I'm like, what happened? I was hoping for a lot better. Next up, we have Far From Home. That is going D tier. I do not like this movie. Gross. This is another one where it's like it could have been so much better, and it's just not. I know a lot of people disagree, and a lot of people are mad when people insult this movie, but I don't care. Incredible Hulk. have not seen, and I never will. I think I tried to watch this movie however many years ago, and it's just boring. Iron Man 2. This one, probably to many people's surprise, is going B tier. This movie is a guilty pleasure. I don't know what it is, I just enjoyed this movie. So many people hate this movie and I understand why, but I like watching it. It's so stupid at so many points throughout the film, but I just like it. I don't know what it is. Something about it with like all the Iron Man movies. There's just a likable quality about it, and it's probably because this was still early on in the MCU and, you know, has Robert Downey as the star. I don't know. There's so much bad about this film and there's so much wrong with it, but I enjoy it and I could keep watching it over and over again. Iron Man 3, that is going A tier. One of the best Christmas movies ever. And if you don't think it's a Christmas movie or a good Christmas movie, you're not allowed to speak. It's the same thing with Iron Man 2, but it's even better than Iron Man 2. The issues that Iron Man 2 had, this one doesn't. It still has a couple, you know, and that twist is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. Shang-Chi obviously made it a little bit better, but still one of the dumbest twists I've ever seen. But it's such an enjoyable movie and it's so different from the first two, and I think that really helps the movie a lot. Now we're on to the first Iron Man, and that is an S tier. So many things about this movie are amazing. I didn't watch this movie until way after it came out, and the way people talked about it, I was honestly expecting it to be overrated as fuck, but it's so good. Tonally, it's so different, and the story is so simple. It's the perfect start to the franchise. It's a great movie. It has that rewatch value. It's just great. Black Panther. Now, I want everyone to listen carefully. It is just a movie. My opinion on this movie is not a personal attack on you, okay? Does everyone get that? Yes? Okay. C tier. I understand why people like it and I understand why people went crazy for it, but the story and the characters and the plot and the villain, I don't know. On one hand, I expected more. On the other, it's like, what more was there to expect? I think I'm just not a fan of the way that it was done. It has the same issue that Doctor Strange has, which is pacing, and it makes the movie feel really weird, and just the idea of Killmonger, quote unquote, killing Black Panther halfway through the movie was a really weird decision to me, and just the way the movie ended and the climax and the weird CGI and just the way the whole thing went. There's just so much about this movie that I have this feeling about. It's one of those things where it's like, it was good in a lot of parts. It has a lot of redeeming qualities still, but people treat this movie like it's S tier, and I don't understand it, personally. Spider-Man Homecoming. This one is a B tier. It's one of those where it's like, this movie, I think more than almost all of them on the list, has an insane rewatch value. It's just a fantastic coming of age film mixed with obviously the superhero element to it, but it's just got that simplicity. There's something about it that makes this movie like so enjoyable, and I could just watch it over and over again, and I have. And even though there's so much about this movie that it's like, this is not Spider-Man. It makes sense for the story. It makes sense for, you know, the way the franchise was set up, if they went in a little bit of a different direction, if the premise was a little different, if he had a little bit more independence, maybe it would be higher. Thor. This is an interesting one. Now, people, when it comes to the Thor trilogy, fucking hate these movies, and I understand why. However, I think the first one is pretty damn good. Hear me out. I am a huge Thor fan, comic Thor, and his origin in the comics is represented perfectly with this movie. It's just a fantastic retelling of what the origin is supposed to be. In the comics, Thor's whole story is just him, pretty much everything you see in this movie, him just being full of himself and cocky, and so his father banishes him. Thor gets the alter ego, Donald Blake, and he becomes human. So his father completely banishes him and takes his power away from him until he learns to be better, and he humbles himself a little bit, and then he earns the power back. And I feel like there is enough of that represented in this movie to make it enjoyable for me. I think it's great. I would rank it higher if I could, but I still don't think it's on par with these, so B tier it is. Thor the Dark World, F. I don't even need to explain this one, do I? Thor Ragnarok. This one is not gonna make people happy. I do not like this movie. I don't even know how to put it into words. I just get that gross feeling that I get with Far From Home. I get that with this movie. On one hand, I like the decision to group up Thor and Hulk in one movie. I like the idea of Loki kind of once and for all being a good guy and working with, alongside this new group of Asgardian heroes. And, the idea of lightening the tone and not making it so dramatic and making it more comedic, not necessarily a bad idea, but it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like I said, I like the first movie, but a lot of people didn't. And so this was a way to try and reinvigorate people about the series. It was a way to hook people back in and get them excited about Thor again. So I totally understand the direction, the logic behind it, the concept. I get it. I just don't enjoy it. Avengers, S tier. This movie still holds up. I feel like the minute it came out, it was a classic, and it still is to this day. It started it all, and it still holds up as an enjoyable movie. There's so much about it that works. It's one where I can sit there and rewatch it over and over again, because overall the movie is just so good. The story is it's not super crazy. It's meant to bring all of these characters together, and it did it in a super enjoyable way. Okay, now we have WandaVision. This one is an automatic S tier, and I know a lot of people don't like this series, which really surprises me. Like, a lot of people think this is the worst one of all the Marvel Disney Plus shows, and I heavily disagree. I feel like this one really stepped out there and really pushed the boundaries of what we're used to with these Marvel shows and movies. I think it was perfect to start the Disney Plus shows with this one. And even though you have like episodes, like I think it was like episode 4 where they like spell it out to the audience, dumb it down, even though it's kind of like spoon feeding, it's still enjoyable and it's still good. And that doesn't make the series bad because they want to make sure everyone understands it, And just the events of like what the fuck is going on the entire time. I love that about the show so much. Oh, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is another Disney Plus show that people do not like so much. S tier. Now, don't get mad, don't get angry. Please, for the love of God, don't get angry. I love Captain America's supporting cast. I always have. I'm a huge fan of Captain America in the comics, and I love how he always has this team of people like Sharon Carter, Falcon, Bucky, and I was so happy that they decided to go in this direction by giving them a show. And the fact that they're all having to sort of step up in the wake of his death, the fact that he's not there anymore, so they're both kind of having to work together to fill a void. I love that concept so much. Loki, now that one's going to A tier. When these two shows were airing, every episode, it was like I could not wait to see what happened next. When it came to Loki, I only really felt that way, probably around... I don't know when I really felt that way in terms of tone and the characters and the mystery and the story. It's really good. Honestly, when the show was announced, I was like, why the fuck? Marvel is so stupid. Why are they doing this? But it worked out for the best, and I'm so excited for season 2. They really blew me away with this, and I did not expect them to. My expectations going into this were so low, but then I saw the trailers and I was like, oh shit, okay. But, I wasn't blown away until like probably the last couple episodes, and then I was like, oh Jesus, I can't imagine how they're gonna end this. How are they gonna wrap all this up? This is getting so crazy. And all the different Lokis and just the idea of time travel and them using a side character for such a big concept like this. I love that idea so much. Shang-Chi, again, I have to say, do not get mad at me. C tier. There are a lot of redeeming qualities about this movie, and I really appreciate the way that it tries to stray away from the idea of, this is a Marvel movie, going into it, you should know what to expect. There's so much about this movie that feels so different, but I think it could have been so much better. Even just Shang-Chi does not stand on his own as a character because he constantly has other people. It felt like it was more about the people around him than it was actually about him. I felt like I didn't even really get to know the character of Shang-Chi that well. I got to know his family and his heritage. I got to know his best friend a lot, but I didn't get to see a lot of him. Black Widow is D tier. I really can't even sit through this movie. Honestly, it came out way too late for me to even care. Moving on, we have What If. I have not seen that one and I never will. Hawkeye, this one was C tier. I still might do a full review on this, so I don't want to say too much, but the show did what it was supposed to do in bringing in Kate Bishop and making her likable, and she's definitely probably one of the best things about the show. She has the charisma where fucking Jeremy Renner does not, so I'm glad we at least have a charismatic Hawkeye in the MCU now. And I like the whole Ronin story. Could have been a lot better, could have been a lot worse. Then we have Eternals. This is going in, haven't seen. And last but not least, we have Spider-Man No Way Home. This one is definitely going in S tier. Admittedly, I am very much still living off the hype of this one. Luckily, I did not get spoiled, and you know, I'm very happy about that. Usually in these situations I do, and I loved what I saw, and it was so good. I mean, I don't want to ramble because like I'm pretty much just gonna end up saying what everyone's been saying about this movie ever since it came out. But I went and saw this movie on Christmas, and it was just like the best way to spend a Christmas. So yeah, guys, that is my list. Let me know if I completely pissed you off in the comments down below. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you want more tier lists. I would love to make more videos about, you know, Marvel or DC or any of this stuff. And yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see y'all later.